Hi Flosstube. My name's Jody and I'm Trixie Tricycle both here on YouTube and on Instagram. This is a Flosstube, I guess, extra. As you can see from the title, this is not a tutorial. This is just me showing how I do a thing. So in my last episode I showed a project bag that I had modified, made it a little bit larger and added a few elements. But the original design came from a floss tuber and extremely talented crafter named Jenn. Her channel is Jenn Crafts, and I'm going to link that in the description below. The original construction techniques that I used to make this bag were from her tutorial, and that's how I learned how to make project bags. Since then, I have made a couple, again, like I said, modifications, but I just want to make sure that the credit is going to the right person. So I have been in contact with her a little bit on Instagram. She's been busy having a sweet baby, and so she hasn't been doing as many videos, but I strongly encourage you to go and watch her channel, watch her story about her journey with Milo, who is her sweet son, and give her and her family some love. So I just wanted to say that to begin with. But a lot of you were interested in getting some of the basics of the measurements that I used for this bag, and so I'm going to make an attempt to do that today. For all of you who do top-down video tutorials, I have a whole new respect for you after having spent most of the day doing my best to try and get this set up. It is, if you could see what I have going on to make this work. So you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to have two different cameras. This is the one that I'll have for all the top-down shots. This is the camera I normally use for my Flosstube episodes. In order to get the sewing bits of this, I have my phone set up in a different room with the sewing machine. And so from room to room, the sound is going to change. The video quality and color is going to change probably. So again, grand experiment, bear with me. The other part of this, you might see me do things like use my rotary cutter the wrong way, or do something in a way more complicated fashion that I don't know, because I'm self-taught on some of this. So the same thing with sewing, with stitching. You might see me use the wrong presser foot. You might see me not use pins. I'm going to be using little clips, whatever. This is a big collaboration. I think that the best part about Flosstube is the fact that we are all learning how to do things, and so I'm not opposed to some suggestions or like, hey, have you ever thought about doing it this way? Because I really, if you're asking the question, the likelihood is I just haven't thought about doing it that way. So that's why I'm very specifically, this is not a tutorial. This is how I do a thing, and I'm sharing the way that I do a thing. So with all of those caveats out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about this bag. So there were a few goals that I had in setting up how I was going to make this bag. The initial, again, Jenn's tutorial is great because she gives very concise, specific instructions on how to do the thing. And her finished large size, and again, the lights in here so that you can see things later, it's going to be a little bit reflecty with a full bag like this. Hopefully that will fix itself. The finished size of her large bag is 13 inches wide by 10 inches tall. It uses a 14-inch wide zipper, and it's self-binding, meaning that the back fabric just wraps around and it stitches onto the front of the bag. It works great until, like, I just have a tendency to want to take every single thing and put it into a project. So this kit has the fabric, it's got the chart, it's got the, you know, in this case, it's got some 103s, some silk spools, so that it tends to, it kind of fills it up pretty quickly. And then also, once you open up that zipper, this ends up having to get tucked underneath that top zipper portion because I'm trying to put the entire chart in. To carry anything in this is perfect. It's actually perfectly sized for most projects because you can fit your floss, you can fit your fabric, you can put it in there, and then it stores nicely into you know, any kind of a soft-sided bin or whatever it is that you want to use for, you know, storing your projects. So I love this, and I've used this extensively. But when I started adding things like this and wanting to put in additional supplies, I needed something a little bigger. So the first modification that I made was to add a strip up here to make it taller, so that when I opened up the project bag now, I could just slide the chart out. It wasn't getting bent. But then I found that I was having a little bit of floppiness here, and so I had to add in a piece of interfacing just to stiffen it. So that got me thinking, like, and not to mention the fact that with Jenn's measurements, you can use a fat eighth, you can use fat quarters. It's very wisely laid out. But when I started modifying it to make it a little bit bigger, then I kind of messed with the overall dimensions. And so it started adding a lot of waste into the fabrics that I was using. So I got to thinking that maybe I should just make it, you know, completely relay out the way that the project bag was going to be constructed based on how I use it. So after lots of math and lots of thinking and lots of experiments, this is what I came up with. So this bag uses a fat quarter and a half. So you can use 3 full fat quarters to make 2 project bags. This will take 2 different types of fabric. So the fat quarter that is for the lining, which is this portion, not the floral, but just the pattern fabric. That is going to be split in half, and one of those halves will be used for one bag and the other will be used for a second bag. The second fabric is going to be just for the back. It's going to be for the 2 strips that comprise the edging of the zipper, and it's also going to allow you enough offcut so that you can make a pocket that'll be kind of variable sizes based on the size of the overall cut of the fabric, and you'll see that in a moment. And then you can also use one of those strips to make a tab that you can sew into the binding as you're finishing it, to use as just either a hanger for a floss drop or for scissors or forever, you know, whatever it is that you want, to have something that's in your bag that you could have up and toward the top. And then that tucks in so that the whole bag can then be zipped closed again. So it doesn't hang out, it doesn't get in the way of your zipper closes all the way across. This pocket here is essentially just fabric that's been turned inside out, stitched, flipped the other way, and then top stitched, and then stitched into the lining. And I'll show you that as well. What I tried to do with this is that if I wanted to have a small size chart, I could fit that into that pocket and still be able to zip the top, or I could also use one of the project cards made by S. Ward Designs. She's on Etsy, and I'll link her store below. But this is a project tracker that allows you to detail all of your, you know, the name of the project, who designed the project, which fabric you're using, and then some details, whether it's you're stitching it, you know, 1/1, you're stitching it with a certain type of floss, or you're doing a conversion. Any details that you want to put in there, you can add to that. And then it's got your start date. Now you can tell that I'm not very good at filling in the individual dates, but I do very much like to have the start date and then the finish date. I tend to keep some of these other details in a journal that I've got, but I do like to have these, and it gives you the dates all the way through 2023. And I think now she's selling ones that go through 2024 as well. So that's helpful. But the good part about these is that that will fit into that pocket, and then you can take So let's say we're going to put in a Barbara Anna chart, which tends to be a little taller than some of the other charts. I can fit the whole thing. This is still in the binder sleeve because I keep my charts in 3-ring binders. But I'm able to fit it all the way in there. I could make a working copy of the chart, or I could just use this, have it protected, and then flip it to the page that I'm working on at the time. And then I can take my floss ring with those, and those can go into the bag, and everything is nice and compact. So this is what it would look like once it's closed. So things aren't getting smashed, everything's staying relatively straightforward. Now the one thing that I did notice is that if you have a larger project going where you've got lots and lots of floss, and if you hold this up, the tab in some cases can pull the top out of shape. And so if you're finding that that's happening, one option would be to add another piece of fusible fleece or a fusible interfacing to the back, and I can show you what that might look like. But for most of the projects that I'm using this for, it's not a problem. I usually keep them stored like this. I keep them sort of stored on their sides once they're in the boxes that I use. And I use little sort of short laundry bins for my hold place. I'll grab that. So this is just a bin that I use. It's a kind of a laundry bin. I think I probably found it at Bed Bath & Beyond. So this has, you could store project bags in this direction, which is what I used to do, but with a wider, the nice thing about these is that this bin, overall it's about 16 inches wide. And so because these bags are about 15.5 when they're done, they fit into this bin, which makes me happy. So when you are choosing fabric, keep in mind that some fabric has a right way up and a wrong way up. And so on this one, this is kind of one of my cautionary tales, where it was one of my first project bags and I just didn't pay attention to how the back was getting constructed when I put it together. And so I have upside down dogs. I kept it because I think it's hilarious. But so when you're considering making these bags, because they can be, you could store them this way, you could store them this way, and if you're not too bothered by the fact that your pattern may end up being the wrong direction, depending on which way you're holding it up, you know, it doesn't really matter. But if you really want to make sure that you've got kind of a unidirectional pattern, so it doesn't matter if it's sideways or if it's up, just think about that when you're making your pattern choices for your fabric. So here is a list of supplies. These are going to be the things that we're going to need. You're going to need to start with, in this case, if you wanted to make 2 bags, you're going to need 3 fat quarters of fabric. This pattern is a Moda fabric, and the collection is Blooming Bunch by Maureen McCormick. And you may know her from Brady Bunch fame. This is Marsha. But she does make beautiful fabrics. And so there's a whole collection that's got these really cute kind of 60s, you know, sort of fun mid-century prints. And I love it. I've used this quite a bit in making my project bags. So today I thought we would pull those out and use that. You're going to need a 12-inch zipper. You can order these in bulk. You can go just to the store and buy them. This is a plastic zipper. I think that they're a little easier to use. You are going to have to cut it, and so I would not go for a metal zipper. You're going to need a cutting mat if you've got one. You don't have to have one, but if you've got a way that you can cut to line everything up properly. So just do your best. If not, I am a huge proponent of, you know, I love my tape measure. like the actual roll-up type tape measure. I use this all the time. I also use just a little ruler, and this will come in handy when we're pressing the border, when we're pressing that binding in, so that we can get, you know, little measurements. We need to sort of be able to measure an inch on each side. You're going to need a rotary cutter, either a large one, small one, whichever one works best for you. Try to use one that's relatively sharp. You'll need some of these little quick clips. I use these instead of pins because we're going to be working with vinyl. You don't really want to use pins because you're going to puncture the vinyl. So I use these to hold everything in place. These are, you know, once you put that tab in, you can put these in afterwards. But if you prefer, like if you're going to be using a keychain style drop for your whatever you're going to put in that tab, and you want to add that beforehand, you can do that and have this ready to go. And this is just a lobster claw. It's got, you know, so that you could put your floss drop or your floss ring. You could connect that to the actual lobster claw, and then you could use, this has got like just a little, it's got a little pivot thing so that you could either put some, like something cute on there, or you could put the label of whatever the project is that you're working on. If you like, you can also have marking pencils or like a little chalk pencil so that you can mark the spot where your pocket goes. I tend to eyeball, so I don't really use these, but it's good to have these on hand if you need one. And then in addition to the fabric, you're going to need to have a piece of vinyl, and this is just a 16 gauge vinyl. I purchased this on a roll. You can get it at Joann Fabric, and they will sell it to you in yards. The yards come in 54-inch wide. It comes off of a 54-inch wide roll. And that is another reason, so I'll show you. You can fit or get 5 pieces if you're measuring it this direction. So because it's 54 inches wide, we're going to be dividing that by 5 so that you can get those measurements, and that will give you the right size that you need for this particular pattern. There are different ways that you can get that vinyl. You don't have to get it rolled. I know that you can order it from different, you know, places, but for folks who are making, you know, multiples of these, which I tend to do, that just seemed to make the most sense to me because it's saving you a lot of time, saving you a lot of measuring, and then you're not having these little offcuts of vinyl, which I really, you know, I like vinyl. I think it's a good, I know some people don't really love it, but what I really don't like is wasting any of it and having to throw it away. So if I can use every bit of it off of that roll, that's what I'm looking for. So this is my, this is a fusible fleece. Same idea with this. That this fleece comes in 44-inch wide, 45-inch wide bolts. So this is a bolt of fusible fleece, and if you measure from here to here, and this is actually folded over so it's doubled. So once you get it off of the roll, if you can measure it so that it's, you know, essentially if you can get a total of 4 of these easily on a 45-inch roll, 45-inch wide roll. So that's again the idea that we're looking for. There will be an extra strip on this, but in some cases you can use that, again, as I was talking about, maybe to support and bolster that upper part of your bag. So you're getting less waste on this than the Pellon that I use is, it's just a Pellon fusible fleece, and you can see it is the 987F as in Frank, and that is the weight. Keep an eye out on Joann Fabric when they've got their 50% off sales, or when they've got the coupon where you can get 50% off one item. In some cases, and that's what I found this one on, that fusible fleece, it was on sale, and then I was able to get it in addition to that. And so buying it, in that case, buying it by the entire bolt made some sense. So it's also nice to have an ironing mat, if you can. So this is just a wool ironing mat, and it's nice because you don't have to set up an entire ironing board, you know, open that thing up and have that taking up extra space. So I usually just have one. You know, warm up your iron. Hopefully mine is warm enough that we'll be able to do something with it. And before I cut my fabric, I really do like to actually press the piece of fabric that I'm going to be using, because you just get better measurements. And especially since we're doing this in a way that isn't going to provide a whole lot of extra, you want to be as exact as possible. So that's why, and I'll use just a little bit of, I've got some Best Press. Be careful about using that on hand-dyed fabrics. If you know, I wouldn't suggest using Best Press unless you're really careful and you test a section of your fabric first. If you're going to be using that on any of your linens that you're cross-stitching on, just word to the wise, or to the newbie like me. But I do like the smell of Best Press. I like it. It's kind of, but water works just as well. You can just spray a little bit of water on there, depending on what your fabric is made of. Obviously, if it's wool, if it's something else that's going to shrink, you just want to be careful. So I'm just going to press this before I cut this out. I watched a video about the difference between ironing and pressing, you know, and the whole, if you don't want to stretch something out of place, how you just kind of lift and press. I think, I'm guessing that if you're quilting and piecing, because, you know, if you do use something or steam, if you use a spray or a steam, whatever, on your fabric, and then you start pulling, you actually can pull it out of shape. So just being careful, watching what your fabric's doing. All of these Moda fabrics are so well made. They're just really, really nice quality fabric. I don't find that I have those kinds of issues. You want to get the edges, because as I mentioned before, when you are using the backing fabric for your binding, you're gonna want to make sure that it's nice and flat before you start working with it. The measurements that we're looking for, we'll start with the lining. And remember that the lining and the fusible fleece are going to be the same measurement, because the lining is going to get pressed into the fleece, and that's going to become one unit. So when I'm talking about the measurements for the lining, it's also the measurement for the fusible fleece. So the lining is going to be 10.5 inches wide. And what I like to do is I do start on the selvage edge and put that on my left. And that way, if I line this up with the edge of the mat, it's usually going to give me a relatively, you know, I'll have a little bit of extra to work with. So if I'm going to be making a 10.5 inch wide piece for my lining, it means that I've got to have this edge over the 21 inch mark, right? For dividing it in half, right? Math. And then we're just going to get gutsy and we're going to go ahead and make our cut. Now I've got a nice straight line. I can flip that over the other direction. And now I'm going to line it right up along the edge, and I'm going to take a look at my 10.5 inch mark, and most likely what's going to end up happening is that it will take off the whole selvage edge, which is exactly what I wanted it to do. So now, again, lining up along the bottom because I don't quite have that visible. I'm just double checking this edge to make sure that I'm not too far off. What do they say? Measure twice, cut once. So I've got a little bit of that selvage edge, but again, that's going to get covered up by the binding, so I'm not too concerned about that. Same deal, I'm just kind of, you know, lining it up so that I've got my 2 straight edges now on my previously cut. I'll go to the 16-inch mark, and I'm going to have to cut one more right off the edge of this because it's uneven. And this is just me getting this down to a manageable size. So there's that. This piece of fleece, let's see what I had it at. Some of this fleece ends up getting cut off, and this overall, this is going to be the actual size of the bag. So that 10.5 by, it's actually going to be 10 by 15.5. So many numbers, gonna mess everybody up. That's not cool. So we got this lined up here. The final cut actually that we're going to end up making, we're going to get this down to 15.5. So the lining and the fusible fleece we're going to put at 15.5. Okay, so here's our fleece. Here's our lining. We're going to put that so that if you feel the fleece, there's a kind of a bumpy side that's got the glue on it, and then you've got a soft side. So you can't really see it, but you can feel it. And so there's the bumpy side, that's got the adhesive, that sticks to the fabric once you get some heat on it. You're going to put that to the back side, okay? Because we want the glue of that fusible fleece to stick to the back side. I wouldn't put it on the hottest setting. I would kind of put it to your synthetic setting. Make sure that it's warm enough. And then this is a case where you're not going to want to slide around like this initially. You're going to want to press, let it just fuse for a moment, lift, press, and it is going to want to kind of stretch out beyond the boundaries of your fleece. That's okay. What we don't want to do is to stretch it all in one direction and then have an edge that has no fleece and then an edge that's got, you know, all the fleece is sticking out but no fabric. So I kind of just, again, this is trial and error. This is not the official way. I don't work for a manufacturer of Pellon or anything else. I'm just doing this in my basement, guys. So I just press and let it sit for just a moment, not too long. I don't want to burn it. And you can kind of see it will actually make a little bit of an impression. And I'm just lifting and just moving it a little bit there to kind of get that initially down in place. Start over again here, work from the middle, out to the corner, and just let it sit for a moment until you can kind of tell when it starts to want to stick together. Same thing here, we're just working our way out from the corner. At this point, once you've got that down in each direction, then you can be a little bit more, you know, jazzy about moving your iron around. So then you're just kind of looking, you want to let this cool off a little bit, and so what I tend to do is just put this to the side. And I'm going to bring in my backing fabric. The backing fabric is going to be used for not only the backing, but also the 2 strips that go here on either side of the zipper. Now, something to know about this bag, that you will be able to see the inside edge of the zipper. Some people don't like that, and so, you know, you can probably figure out a way that this would not be visible. You know, if it's stitched, you never really see it, at least I don't, and it saves so much time I just am not fiddly enough to want to like go in there and figure out a way to line this portion and to enclose both the vinyl in the tab and also to enclose the zipper in the tab. I've never had a problem with it. It doesn't get stuck. It's not like it's, you know, coming apart or anything. So, but I just, you know, full disclosure, you're going to be able to see the edge of the zipper in the way that we're constructing this. So, heads up. So the overall measurement of the back is going to be 18, okay? So that's going to be this measurement because your fat quarter is 18 by 22 inches approximately. That's what the finished. So it's going to be 18 tall and then it's going to be 12.5 inches wide. And this is where things start to get kind of cool because I'm going to use all of this and all I'm going to do is just clean it up and make sure that it's the right width. So selvage edge on the left-hand side. So we'll start out with that first measurement. Again, we're just going to match up that ruler to the bottom edge. I want it to be 12.5 inches wide. And I apologize to everybody who uses the metric system. It makes so much more sense. I only know inches because America, apparently. So 12.5 inches wide. I've got that 18 inches. This I'm going to set off to the side. Let's flip that around. So now we've got that straight edge right up against 0. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go again to my 12.5 inch to get my final width measurement. And it is worth it to just take your time, measure it out. Again, this is going to get folded under, so you don't have to worry about too much. We are trying to maximize, use as much of this fabric as we can, and so that's why I'm getting so close to that selvage edge. So I want this to be right at 18. So you see I've got a little bit of extra. I'm going to make sure that I'm lined up on one of those straight edges here. I'm going to go right to 18 and I'm just going to take a hair off to square it up. Same thing, gonna flip it around. So I am at 18 inches now. This is the back. I'm gonna set this aside. Now we're gonna make the 2 strips that we're going to use to go on either side of the zipper. They're going to be 11 inches long, and I want one of them to be 2 inches, and I want one of them 4 inches. And we're going to go up to 11 inches. So this is my cut edge. This is the edge that I've already got that's cut now. This is going to be uneven. That's all right. It's not, you know, it's not the end of the world. So we'll cut this 11 inches. This, hang on to this. This is going to be our pocket. Okay, that piece is going to end up being our pocket. Now I've got this at 11 inches and I want to square it up. So I've got my cut edge down here. I've got my cut edge on the left. I'm going to go right to 11. Nigel, these go to 11. And now I'm going to cut, it doesn't really matter where, you know, whatever's convenient for you on your mat, just go to a 2 inch. This is one of my strips. And then the next one is going to be 4 inches. So we'll go down to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, doing the math. So wait. Now this is your tab. So this is the strip that's going to turn into your tab. So you've got your pocket and you've got your tab. And you have your back. This is the back fabric. And this this is how much waste you have from that fat quarter. Everything else is going to get used in the bag, and I just think that's really cool. So this over here is what you're going to have left for the back, the lining, right? So it's going to be this strip here, which you could also use for something else. You could use it for a zipper pull tag, you could use it for, you know, but it's just very little waste. So remember, the other half of that backing fabric is going to be for a second bag. Okay, so now that we've got our back fabric in place, we've got our 2 strips. These are going to be for the zipper. And make sure that, you know, because this is similar, this tab fabric is similar, make sure that you just keep these off to the side. So I would just put that, I would put that with my lining fabric that's got the fleece on it. And then keep my backing fabric separate. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press these 2 pieces that'll be on either side of my zipper. So we are just going to take the 2-inch strip, we're going to put it insides together, and we're just going to press it in half the long way. And put that to the side. Same thing with your 4-inch strip. You're going to go ahead and just put it inside of the fabric together. Watch your fingers, go ahead and press it. The good part about using a little bit of best press at the very beginning, when you're ironing your fabric to begin with, is that that stays in the fabric. It's just a little bit of stabilizer, and so then when you go to press it into a shape, it's going to reactivate it and let it use it again. So then you're going to open it up. So you've got this pressed the long way. Open your fabric back up again. And this is going to get folded in again so that this is lined up just with the center. And then just carefully press that outside edge. Flip it over, do the same thing. All we're doing is just going right to the center. You can get that out of your way if you want. And it, you know, yeah, try to make it accurate, but don't obsess over it. Then those are going to go together, and you're going to fold the whole thing over. So once it's done, you'll have a folded over section, and then you'll have this open. And the way this is going to work, just so you can see it before we take it to the sewing machine, this little tab right here is going to sandwich your vinyl. So that, what we're looking at is this piece right here. Okay? So this piece sits just like this. So the opening is what, you know, alligator bites onto this vinyl. And this side is what gets stitched to the zipper. So it will look like this. Our zipper tab is going to be on this side. That's going to get stitched down. This side with the folded end is also going to go here. And then our vinyl is going to get sandwiched, and it's hard to see it, I know, but it's going to get sandwiched all the way in so that this gets stitched right along this edge, and then that's how we attach our vinyl. Okay, so we're going to take that out to the sewing machine, and we're going to get that portion of it constructed. What I'm going to do while I'm here also, because I'm going to take with me the lining fabric,
this is going to be my pocket. Okay, remember we talked about this pocket fabric and how I am going to stitch it the wrong way. So I'm going to press this. Essentially, this is going to get stitched. And I'm going to have a little opening here. So I'm going to stitch here, here. I might leave this edge open, or I may top stitch it and then back down. It just depends on how I feel. We'll flip that inside out. And then once that gets flipped inside out, then that's going to go here. The same thing, I'm going to stitch this around the edge, and then I'm going to flip it inside out, and we're going to top stitch that down, bend it over. So I'll show you that in just once we get out to the machine. Now you can see in the bag that I've made, the pocket and the tab, they're not super accurate. They're just extras, so you don't have to worry about them being completely perfect. But those are going to go out with me. I'm going to take this out, and we're going to do some stitching. So we shall be back. Here we are, we're out at the sewing machine, and we are going to start putting some stitches in. As again, you notice that we're in a different room, so the sound's going to be different. The light quality is going to be a little bit different, but we'll just see how it goes. So this is a Singer 15125. This was for sale at my kind of local salvage place that I love to go to, including the table, which is in pretty rough shape, but the machine itself was in amazing shape for $25. And when I first got it home, it was not, it wasn't running. It was the motor would barely turn over. And I spent a couple of hours going through it, and really all it needed was to be oiled. So now it runs beautifully and it's in really good shape, and I love it. So anyway, it's kind of cute. So I'm going to set these down and make sure that I've got my zipper in the right direction, that I've got these set up correctly, just so that I know which piece I'm actually going to be stitching. So I'm going to start out with the piece that will be on my, that'll be holding the vinyl together, okay? So it doesn't have to go all the way to the edge, but what I don't want to start stitching way out here, because that's going to leave too much space, and this is going to end up being visible. So I want to be someplace in between here. When you start looking at the way that this is set up, so I want this to be stitched somewhere between the zipper pull and the edge. And it really doesn't matter where. I just want that to be, I want the folded edge to be right up against the zipper itself. And then I'm just going to drop that in place. And we're going to start stitching, and just go slowly. You know, use your hand wheel to kind of get it in place. Make sure that your presser foot is in the right spot. And back stitch it a couple to lock it in place. And you really don't need to go fast on this. All you're doing is just holding this in place so that your fabric doesn't slip away from your zipper and it doesn't bunch up. So you're not trying to put any tension on it. You're just allowing it to sit together and just let it. And the slower you go, it actually keeps that fabric from bunching up too much, and it allows you time. You know, if you need to stop, you can, with the needle down, just to straighten this out and to make sure that you're still on a good line. Now, when you get close to the zipper itself, if you feel like you're going to end up running into your zipper pull with your presser foot, you don't want to do that. And so get your needle down in that down position to lock everything in place, lift up your presser foot and open the zipper, okay? It's not a big deal. You're not going to break anything. So just open the zipper, drop that back down again, and then keep stitching. When you get to the edge, again, you're going to take a few lock stitches, just go in reverse, and then go ahead and pop it back up. Give yourself enough thread. Okay, so there we are. So on the back side, it's relatively even. Looks like everything's locked in place okay. And we've got that zipper with the folded side, zippers on the left, the pulls on the left, and then you've got that opening there where the vinyl's gonna go. But first we're gonna put on this other strip. So we're just gonna line this up again so that it's straight across from where that first set was. We are actually going to open this so that we don't end up running into our zipper pull, okay? But you just wanna line it up so that it's at about the same spot. Doesn't have to be perfect, because again, that's gonna get cut off. And what I would do is just get your piece started by using your hand wheel, letting that get worked in slowly. Get a couple lock stitches in, and then stop with your needle down. Lift up your presser foot, get the zipper back to the original spot, because now you're past it. And now you can stitch this with the zipper together, okay? So again, I'm just kind of using my fingers. I'm just gonna try and keep it so that it stays laid in place. This is another reason why having good pressed fabric makes a huge difference, because you've got a nice flat surface to work on. Just take your time when you get to the end. A couple of lock stitches. And raise that up. Okay. So really all we're looking for is just to make sure that that zipper isn't, we don't have a lot of puckers in there. That's the idea, is to just have it nice and flat, okay? And then this is what the back side looks like. So the next step is going to maybe create some issues for us because of how I've got this camera set up, but we're gonna do our best. Here is, if you can see, I've got that vinyl that I am just sliding in so that it is sandwiched in between these two pieces. So I want that vinyl to go all the way back to the edge, so that when you open this up, you can see that the vinyl is all the way tucked into that crevice right there. And try to make it so that it's centered. The vinyl is actually going to be narrower than both your zipper and also these tabs. That's fine. Just do your best to center it. Now, when we do this, we are going to stitch right along the edge of the vinyl. And it does have a tendency to want to shift around. So what we don't want to do, we don't want to put back stitches in on this. So we want to start as close as we can to the edge. And again, we're just making sure that that vinyl is all the way in, all the way back here to this seam. We're going to go ahead and just start with one. I would just get your needle in the down position through the vinyl once, right there. Now come down to the other end. You can't really see it because I'm off the camera, but you're going to come down to the other end and make sure that the vinyl is pushed in all the way down the length of the zipper tabs. And sometimes I'll put a little, like a clip instead of a pin. I don't ever use pins on the vinyl, but we are going to just hold that in place all the way back You'll be able to see that once we get closer. And I'm just running so that this edge of the presser foot is running along the edge of the fabric. And if the vinyl is pushed in well enough, then you should be in good shape. You'll be capturing that. And again, just taking your time. If it does get caught up, sometimes it will. Sorry about the bumps and the bangs. If it gets caught up on your surface, like on your work surface, try to put something underneath it that will help it to slide along. It comes with some tissue paper that it's wrapped in, and that will sometimes help so that it just doesn't get, what you don't want is for it to get stuck on your table and then have it pivot and then get pulled out of position. So I think the priority here is to just keep those stitches even, right? To keep them so that they're an even distance apart, because this is visible on the front of your bag. If it starts to bunch, go ahead and drop your needle down, just lift up, try and flatten it out a little bit, put it back down again. And again, we're not back stitching here because that's going to make holes in your vinyl. And this is going to get covered by the binding anyway, so that should lock it in place. Okay, so this is what it should look like when it's done. You've got it's stitched up into the edge there, right? And that vinyl goes all the way back to this seam up here right next to the zipper. And so and it is going to be narrower. As you can see all the way over here on this side, this is much narrower. Okay, but that's all going to get cut and matched up to your lining. So for now, we can set that piece aside. Now we're going to start to work on the pocket and on the tab. So I'm going to stop here just a moment from the corner, or a stitch or two away from the corner, with my needle down. I'm then going to pivot same thing, pivot, and I'm actually going to just stitch along here because that's going to give it a side that's going to match up. I don't have to do this, but it just makes it look more consistent. Now I've left this end open. And I'm going to go ahead and cut this. So this ends up getting turned inside out, and you can do that with a chopstick. You can do it with a number of things, but we'll work on that. And, you know, you basically just kind of keep rolling it with your fingers eventually, but having some type of a chopstick or a stick that you can use on the other end tends to make it go a little bit more quickly, but it's not that hard. All you're doing is just turning this inside out on itself. So that's why you want to have those lock stitches on the ends. So we'll worry about that in a moment, but that's what we're working on in that. And then we're going to do the same thing here. This time, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start just a little bit, kind of like if you were to do a pillow finish. So I'm going to leave an opening here on this section of the pocket. And I'm going to start with stitches here. And again, we can start with the back stitches or we can start with whatever. Okay. About an 1/8 inch from the corner. Keep my needle down on the turn. Same thing here. What I'm doing right here is exactly what you would be doing if you were to be making a pillow. You've got, you know, your pretty sides together. The only difference is I'm not going to fill it with anything. You're going to drop that down in your corner. Needle down, turn. Give yourself a few inches. Needle down, go ahead and just lock it in. Okay. Now, what I like to do if you want your corners to be a little bit more precise is that you can actually cut all the way to the stitch. You don't want to go through the stitch, but you just want to take some of that fabric away. It's really not that important on something like this, but for a pillow finish, this is essentially what you would do. So, same thing, we're turning this inside out. And you can use a turning tool. This happens to be a machine screwdriver. As long as you don't have a really sharp edge, it doesn't have oil or anything else on it, that works. And then you just, you know, you can push out the corners. So pushing those final corners out and just being careful if you're using anything sharp so that you don't tear your fabric. Now you've got that one final little edge, and we will take this and go and press these and then talk a little bit about how we're going to construct that. Okay, so we will be back. Okay, so we are back into our pressing area and construction area. We've stitched this and turned this inside out. Same thing with our little tab. And you can use anything, you know, again, I mentioned a chopstick, but you can use a, you know, if you've got the non-writing end of a pencil, whatever. Chopsticks are nice because they're a little bit longer, but essentially all you're doing is you're just turning this tab inside out. This is the fiddliest part, to be honest. But this is going to be your tab piece. You really don't have to worry about covering up that seam, because that's going to end up, that seam is going to end up being in the binding. So all I do, right now you're going to hear millions of voices suddenly call out and then be silenced, but I'm using a kebab stick to push out my edges on this. It's long. I would be very careful about this because it is sharp, but it is a nice tool for doing long, straight things like this. And I'm sure there is a fantastic tool that has already been made that is for sale, and you don't have to use a kebab stick. This is essentially my, and I'm sorry for bouncing again here, this is the turning tool equivalent of my 2x4 floss sizer of death. You're welcome. Okay, so keeping this seam, so you've got a seam like, you know, on either side, and we're just going to try and keep that centered so that those seams on either edge. We're going to turn it in half. And we can do a double. Like this is long enough that this would be, you know, it would be okay if we actually made it a double ring. But I do like to have that extra sort of bulk to it, because it just kind of holds onto your floss. So that's typically what I do. And then when I get back out to the machine, I'm just going to stitch that down. We'll press the pocket. And do the same thing here. We actually want this to be kind of turned inward.
Want that to be turned inward.
Because this will be visible. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just kind of turn it in so it matches up with the seam. So when you're deciding where on the lining, and here's your zipper with your vinyl that's not attached yet, when you're deciding where you want that to go, consider that you're going to have a seam on this side. And if you want to be able to put a pattern in here, you also want to be cognizant of the fact that the zipper is going to sit about right there. And so what I did is I just kind of lowered it down until I could see generally where that was going to be, make a decision about it, and then just stitch it, you know, to that location. So this ends up being about 4 inches, like the bottom of the pocket's going to be about 4 inches up, and you're going to leave about a 1/2 inch between the edge of the lining and the edge of your pocket. Okay?
So that will be the next thing that we do. We'll stitch that in,
And we will top stitch our little strap together so that we will be ready to fold it up in position like this. Okay, so
we'll be back.
okay, so we are back at la machine, and we are going to stitch our pocket in. And again, we were just kind of estimating it's going to be approximately 4 inches from the bottom of the lining fabric and about a 1/2 inch in from the edge. So because this is a pocket, I'm going to actually put in a few. This is going to be right to the edge. So I'm using this little, the presser foot's got basically an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So this doesn't have to be perfect. Again, this is just, we're using the fabric and we're getting a pocket in here, but we'll start it out. We'll get a few lock stitches in here. And that should be good. And then we're just going right along the edge. So if you can see, I mean, I am right up against the edge of the fabric. And you're going to leave that down. Lift your presser foot. We're going to rotate and down again. Now this is a little bit wobbly wonky. I'm kind of okay with it. It's, you know, it looks a little prim, whatever. And I'm just going to stitch my way along the edge, keeping in mind that as I'm stitching this, I'm also locking in this little hole that we left in order to be able to turn our piece inside out, okay? So that's why we want to be so close to the edge on this particular section here. If we get too far away, then those little ends are going to flip out. I'm slowing down as we get to the corner, and we're just going to go ahead and pivot from there. We're not doing anything to pull. We don't want to pull this out of position. We're just kind of holding it in place. And again, if it starts to pucker, if it starts to push this way, drop your needle, lift, press it out to the side if you can, let some of that tension out, and then just get going again. Lock stitches. And we're going to leave that top edge loose, obviously, because, you know, pocket. So then you've got your pocket opening there. The next thing we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and top stitch we're going to top stitch this so that we've got a nice little piece of tab. Rest in peace, tab. Darn it. Okay. Now, when it's thick like that, when you've got a few layers of fabric, sometimes you need to guide it just a little bit. And again, we're just going to go really slow around the edge. This is decorative as much as anything. It's not really structural, but it's just going to give us a nice finished edge for our tab that will be visible. So again, right to the edge, lifting up.
Okay, so we are back from the machine, and now is when we're going to start to assemble the bag. So we need to get this vinyl and zipper to line up with and to match exactly the lining. Now that we've got the pockets sewn in, we are going to try and maintain this distance between the edge of the pocket. So some of the lining and fusible interfacing is going to get cut away, and so is some of the zipper and part of the vinyl. So what we really just want, our ultimate goal, is for this to be the exact same size as what's underneath. Okay, so it's again difficult to see, but I'm trying to line up the top of this of the zipper pull with the line. That's the most important piece right now, is to line those two up and to make sure that they're square, because that's going to determine if our zipper is square or not. So I'm going to go right along this edge, and I'm going to find the edge of my vinyl, which currently is right up to the edge of my fusible interfacing, which is good. And I'm going to apply a fair amount of pressure, and I'm just going to cut anything that's excess, which means my zipper may have to go through a couple of times. But now I've got a really dull rotary cutter blade. Now I don't want to move this now. Once I've started to get one edge, I really want to be careful about not lifting this too much. I am going to have to get my zipper pull out of the way though. And so just pressing down, keeping a little pressure on that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just hold everything in place, pull my zipper open. Again, I'm just keeping a finger in place there so that that doesn't let that open up and change my measurements. Okay, and I've double checked over here to make sure that this is still lined up. And now I'm just going to carefully lift up my ruler, and I'm going to drop it down so that it is even with my vinyl again. And again, it's very difficult to see, but trust that I'm right up against where that vinyl is. Okay. And just carefully trying to keep it all in one position so we're not sliding things around.
Try to get that lined back up again. Remember that one time when I had a super shitty rotary cutter? Okay, we're just lining this up to make sure that this is still in place. We're going to go ahead and take that bottom strip of vinyl off so that it matches up. Okay, so now what we should have is that our zipper and our vinyl should match this exactly. And I'm going to put my zipper pull back on because I just did exactly what you're not supposed to do, and I just yanked my zipper pull right off of here. Okay, so once we have gotten that, the lining and the vinyl with the zipper to the same size, we're going to go ahead and start working on the back and how the back is going to wrap and create that binding for the lining. You're trying to get your side to side and top, all the spaces around the edges to be the same. So I'm looking here and I've got just over an inch on this side and about an inch and a quarter. So I'm going to slide this over just a bit. And this makes a difference when you end up folding this over and trying to create these mitered corners. If it's off too much, it's going to create problems for you. So that's just about an inch and a quarter. Same thing, just over 1/8. So we're good here. This is about our point. So now for some folks, this would be where they might want to mark. You know, just take like a regular pencil mark if you've got lighter fabric, or if you wanted to use a... For me, I'm not going to do that. I'm just, you know, not. So I made that rookie mistake where once you've got your zipper cut, what you don't want to do is zip it off to the side, which is exactly what I did. So my zipper's a little bit wobbly here on this side. I'm going to go ahead and try and get that put back together again the right way. But ultimately, you can kind of see what we are starting to do. We're going to be folding this over and then over again so that that creates the binding. And then on the corners, we're going to be doing a little edge. So that's why you want this top to line up so that the zipper is directly over where that lining in the fleece is. Okay, just going to start to work your way around, and I just start by I finger press and I come about, I don't know, 1 millimeter or 2 away from the edge of the fabric. I don't want to be right up on it once the vinyl piece gets put on. And the reason that you pull that vinyl piece off and that you don't attach it ahead of time is because it will melt. So you need to be able to press this part while you've got no vinyl attached. Okay, so that's why this sort of order of operations needs to take place. We'll do the same thing. Don't worry too much about the mitered corners. We're going to actually kind of stay away from the corner. At least that's what I do. Again, just press each of those corners or each of the sides in for now. And you can go over the top of the interfacing, that's not a big deal, over the top of the liner. Okay, so we've left ourselves a little bit of a gap. And now I like to do the same thing all the way in. So I just press. So you're essentially folding it up one more time. Again, leave the corners alone for a sec. And you'll see why in a minute. So now what you see is that is actually going to come right up to the edge of that pocket, which is perfect. That's exactly what we wanted it to do. Try not to shift your liner around too much. Try to keep it in place as you do this. Now,
We can put the iron away because we got the vinyl out. So never the twain shall meet, which is good.
So I like to start out with a few of these clips, one on each side, just to hold it in place. Now don't forget your tab there. It's going to get stitched all the way along right with that, with the border. When we get to the corners, you're going to unfold this. I like to stitch it so that the miter goes over the top of the edge, so that the bottom is tucked in this way and the sides are over the top. So to see that again, this is folded over twice. I've opened this all the way up. I've made a 45-degree angle to this first fold. So there's a 45. I basically have folded that up, made a 45-degree angle there. Notice the distance away from here to here, and that still allows me to fold this in and make that second fold so that the two mitered edges line up, and I've got a 45-degree angle and I have a point. Now these, Jen described it really well when she did the video that I watched. She said sometimes you just got to take it apart. They're fiddly, they don't always fit, but it should work just fine. So again, when I get up here, I'm going to do the same thing. So this opens up. Try to keep this straight, coming straight out the side. You're going to fold it down, giving yourself a 45-degree angle. Leave some space right there so that this can fold down and then fold it over. So you've got that nice mitered edge, and clip it. I like to clip anywhere there's going to be a bit of a seam. We've got that tab in there. So that's where you could make that decision. Do you want to have two layers? Do you want to just have a single layer? How do you want it to work? Be careful not to allow this to pull to the side too much. Give yourself some room so that when you're stitching around, the zipper is going to be out of your way. But if you stitch it and the zipper is pulled like this, it's going to look funny. It's going to pucker. So one more mitered corner here. Keep it straight. 45 degrees out here so that you've got enough room to fold that over. And then hold it in place and fold it so that you've got your corner. And then clip it. Okay, so once you get this out to the machine, I would just start at the bottom corner. That's kind of where I like to start. Try to get as close to the edge as possible. Capture both sides of this, and then just work your way around. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the corner, and we're going to go ahead and just take a few stitches, staying as close as we can. We're going to go ahead and lock that in. And I'm just moving these clips as I go. This is going to have a tendency to want to roll. So we're just working as we go. We're just easing it in by lifting the presser foot. Once the needle is down in that down position, we're just going to go ahead and work it over. And just try to go slowly so we don't get puckers. But it's, you know, again, it's a project bag. We're not building Taj Mahal here. Tends to want to get caught on things. That's okay. So again, just working on easing that tension in. So I'm assuming it's kind of like doing a binding on a quilt. I don't know, maybe. Get to the corner, and then we're just trying to maintain that mitered edge that we just built. So then we're going to get to the corner. We're just going to slow down and we're going to watch until we're just over the edge into our next fabric, and then we're going to go ahead and rotate. Now normally I wouldn't have this camera in the way, so it'd be a little easier. Pull out that clip, and we're just going to keep rolling. Again, try to stay close to the edge onto the vinyl side, otherwise you're going to have all this flappy fabric. And we're just doing our best to just hold it in place. Got a couple clips coming up here. Now remember, when we get to the zipper, make sure the zipper pull is out of the way. And we are going to watch the corner. You kind of got a couple things to manage here. So you're going to go right over the zipper, and then you're going to backstitch. And I would do that on this side at least twice. Now slow, and when you get to the corner, you're going to go ahead and wait until you get to that edge. Make sure that you've got the fabric overlapped, pivot, so that you've got a nice 90-degree turn. Now here, again, you're going to have all that weight of fabric. You get lots of layers with your tab, and so you may have to do a little hand crank and just really babysit it as it goes across. Good. Now once you're through, you're going to keep going. Move that, watch your miter. Okay, final leg, just roll that around. Same thing on this zipper. Drop that. Once you get across, you're going to backstitch it. This time probably find you just backstitch once. We'll just take our time with that last leg, just because this is the one that tends to like to pucker a bit. Slow down so you can try and meet up. Okay. So, we got this together. Test the zipper. Looks like it's doing okay. So we're going to go ahead and head into the other room and see our finished product.
Okay, so phone camera let us stitch after all. So hopefully you just were able to see that piece of it where we're able to stitch around the edges. So this is the completed bag, and the final measurements on this particular one, and you know, each one, I mean, they're handmade, so each one's going to vary just a little bit. This one turned out to be 10.5 by almost 16, so we really didn't lose a whole lot in the binding process. I really think that some of the key take-homes are just to make sure that you spend some time getting accurate cuts, making sure that you press everything, just because it makes it so much easier at the machine. Take your time when you're putting together those mitered corners. If you had a hard time sort of following this, again, I learned this basic technique of how to self-bind a project bag from Jenn at Jenn Crafts. And so I really encourage you, watch her video. She does a very good job, much better I think than I do, at explaining a lot of the detail of what the construction of this bag is like. As for adding the pocket, putting in vinyl or fleece interfacing, that's really the only difference. She just uses a kind of a Pellon non-fleece interfacing, which is fine too. And then the orientation's just a little bit different. So she's just got it's a little wider, and then she's got the longer zipper on the top. The tab, I think, again, that is really just up to your taste, how, you know, robust you want that to be. But I think this turned out kind of cute. It's got, you know, it's kind of cheery. And with that fleece interfacing, I just find it gives it a little bit more sturdiness for a larger size. So for the smaller size, I think the regular interfacing is just, you know, it's completely fine. So now, you know, we're able to actually put a project together. So if you haven't seen this, this is super cute. One Can't Be Angry When One Looks at a Penguin by Modern Folk Embroidery. That's actually a quote from Ruskin. So I thought maybe I would use this. That's actually a piece of Mermaid by The Primitive Hare, which I think would be really pretty. It's got kind of a, looks like ice, yeah. And then the Leo and Roxy flosses from Evertote. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hopefully we'll be able to cobble something together. If you do have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer if I can. So yeah, anyway, I think that about does it for me. And look at how roomy. Got so much room. You can put a little zipper pull on this if you like, you know, something cute. You could just add like a little lobster claw and put a zipper pull on there. And so ultimately there is the bag, and this turned out to be everything that was left over. So from a fat 1/4.5, this is all of the offcut that we ended up with. I think there was one little strip of vinyl that we had. Yeah. You do want to have a little bit of room to make that adjustment. Now that you know kind of how this is constructed, when you're matching up the lining with the zipper and the vinyl, you need to have a little bit of wiggle room, but this is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So only about a 1/2 inch, just over 1/2 inch of offcut. But the rest of it is just this. So we had that one strip, which I can then use for something else from the lining fabric. And then I still have the other half of the lining fabric that I can use with another main fabric to make a second bag. So anyway, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye for now.